Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we've got a very specific and honestly, a highly achievable goal. We're going to take you from 0 to a perfect 200 on the GED's Social Studies exam. And how exactly are we going to pull that off? Well, by mastering the ultimate rulebook of the United States, the U.S. Constitution. If you've been feeling, a little overwhelmed by memorizing historical dates or drowning in complex political jargon, just take a deep breath. We're going to break this all down into a super focused, highly efficient playbook.
Okay, let's dive into this playbook structure. Navigating the map of our government is way easier when we break it down into these clear steps. We'll hit the blueprint for scope and scoring, the core principles in the preamble, the articles for government structure, and the amendments, specifically the Bill of Rights. Then we'll do some practice questions and wrap it all up with a cheat sheet.
First up, Section 1, the blueprint. Because, look, knowing exactly what is on the test is basically the #1 way to completely eliminate test anxiety. You really don't need to know every single thing that ever happened in history. Honestly, you just need to know where the test focuses its attention. Take a look at this breakdown. The GED's Social Studies test focuses on 4 main categories. Geography and the world is 15%. Economics is another 15%, and U.S. history makes up 20%. But check out that massive 50% slice right there, civics and government. That literally means half of your entire grade hinges on understanding how the nation runs. And that is exactly why we're focusing so heavily on the U.S. Constitution today. It's the absolute engine of that 50%. So let's talk about the actual stakes here. The test is scored on a scale from 100 to 200 points. To snag your high school equivalency credential, you need to earn a scaled score of at least 145 points. That 145, that's your target passing standard. Hit 165 or higher, and you're officially entering college-ready territory, which is awesome. Also remember, there's 0 penalty for wrong answers on the GED. None. So our goal today is to give you the exact skills you need to confidently secure those 145 points and push way beyond that. Moving right along to Section 2, Core Principles, we're starting at the very beginning with the Preamble, which really just sets the fundamental goals of the whole government. You see, the Constitution doesn't just list a bunch of dry rules. It actually starts with a profound purpose. That intro, the Preamble, outlines what the government is actually trying to achieve. So the crucial point is this major keyword: popular sovereignty. This is a massive, massive theme on the GED. It simply means that the government derives its power from the consent of the governed. Basically, the citizens have a voice, and the government only has authority because we, the people, allow it. When you see phrases like "we, the people" in the preamble, or honestly, even when you just go cast a vote in a local election, that is popular sovereignty in action. Okay, another absolutely essential keyword you've got to remember is federalism. The Constitution created a federal system. This means power isn't just sitting heavily in one place. Instead, it's divided up. It's split between a central, national government, which handles big, entire nation functions like defense, and the state governments, which maintain authority over local, day-to-day functions. This clever division prevents any one single level of government from having absolute power.
All right, Section 3, the Articles. Let's move chronologically into how the government structure is actually built. These are the structural blueprint for how the country operates.
Right after the Preamble, we get into the 7 Articles of the Constitution. Like I said, these act as the day-to-day blueprint. Think of it kind of like a 3-legged stool. To prevent tyranny, the founders divided the national government into 3 totally distinct branches. Article 1 establishes the legislative branch, that's Congress, and they make the laws. Article 2 sets up the executive branch, including the president, to actually enforce those laws. And Article 3 creates the judicial branch, headed by the Supreme Court, to interpret the laws and make sure they align with the Constitution. And this brilliantly illustrates the separation of powers. Each branch has its own specific job, and each branch can check or limit the power of the other 2. It makes sure that stool never tips over into tyranny. Oh, and here's a crazy fun fact. This entire brilliant blueprint was debated and written in just about 100 days. Wild, right?
Okay, let's jump to Section 4, Amendments. Specifically, we're talking about the Bill of Rights and how we make changes to the Constitution over time to protect our personal freedoms.
Because let's be real, what happens when things need to change? An amendment is simply a change or addition made to the Constitution over time. The founders actually knew society would evolve, so they purposefully included a process to update the supreme law of the land. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that almost immediately after the Constitution was drafted, citizens were pretty worried. They thought the central government was still a bit too powerful and might step all over individual rights. So by 1791, the first 10 amendments, which we collectively called a Bill of Rights, were drafted and ratified specifically to restrict Congress from abusing its power. Now listen to me closely. You do not need to memorize every single historical date for this exam, but you absolutely do need to understand the core concepts in this quick guide of the most heavily tested amendments. Let's do a quick scan. Look at Amendment I. It guarantees freedom of religion, speech, the press, assembly, and petition. Amendment 2 protects the right to bear arms. Jump to Amendment 4. That one guards against unreasonable searches and seizures without a warrant. Amendments V and 6 ensure due process and the rights of accused persons. Things like a speedy trial. And then Amendment 10 reinforces that key word we learned just a minute ago, federalism, by reserving any leftover powers strictly to the states. Time for Section 5, practice. Let's shift from theory to actual practice, looking at the question, the technique, and the work. You can absolutely do this. All right, let's put all that theory into practice. Reading facts is one thing, right? But analyzing them in a high-pressure test format is a whole different ballgame. Here's a classic, representative GED-style question. You'll definitely see variations of this, but breaking it down here will show you exactly how to approach them on test day. Okay, the question reads, what is the primary purpose of the system of checks and balances in the U.S. government? Your options are A, to ensure the judicial branch is the most powerful, B, to prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful, C, to speed up the process of creating new laws, or D, to give the president control over Congress. Let's use what we call our show work technique. I'm going to think out loud here. First, we identify the key phrase in the question, checks and balances. We know from earlier that this relates to the 3 branches of government. Next step, eliminate the distractors. Let's look at choice C. It's wrong because checking power actually slows the lawmaking process down. It definitely doesn't speed it up. Choices A and D, also completely incorrect, because the whole point of the system is that no single branch, not the judicial, not the president, controls the others. So by eliminating those wrong answers, we're left with choice B, which perfectly matches our definition. The system exists to prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful. Let's move to and see how this builds with a second practice question, this time focusing on the Bill of Rights. Which part of the U.S. Constitution guarantees freedoms such as speech, religion, and the press? Is it A, the Preamble, B, the First Amendment, C, the Fourth Amendment, or D, the Articles of Confederation? Let's break it down again using our technique. Step 1, identify the key words. Here, it's freedoms, such as speech, religion. Step 2, recall our cheat sheet and those foundational texts we studied earlier. The Preamble? Well, that's just the introduction. It states goals, not specific freedoms. The Articles of Confederation? That was the old weak government before the Constitution even existed. So we know it has to be an amendment. We remember the Fourth Amendment is all about searches and seizures, and that leads us perfectly to Step 3, selecting choice B. The First Amendment explicitly protects an individual's right to religion, speech, and the press. See, connecting keywords directly back to the foundational text works every single time. And finally, Section 6, the cheat sheet. Here is the answer key and the main takeaways you need to study efficiently. You guys are doing fantastic. We've mapped the blueprint, we've explored the structure, and we just proved we can tackle the actual test questions. Just to confirm your notes, our answer key for those practice questions was B for question 1 and B for question 2. Now here are your absolute final takeaways. Remember, the GED Social Studies test does not want you to memorize a massive, boring list of historical dates. Instead, you need to study the big ideas, like popular sovereignty, federalism, and the separation of powers. Focus really heavily on reading for meaning and interpreting passages or charts. Make sure you absolutely master the roles of the 3 branches of government and the core protections in the Bill of Rights. And whenever you sit down for a test, keep actively using that elimination technique we just practiced. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. If the framers could design a system way back in 1787 that still successfully balances power and protects your individual voice today, aren't you ready to walk into that testing center and prove you understand how it works? Keep practicing these skills, master these big ideas, and you are absolutely going to crush this exam. Catch you next time.